Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing when your ex will forget you. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing when your ex will forget you. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will be worried your ex might forget you. In today's podcast, I'm going to discuss 2 moments your ex will think of you less, as well as answering the question of when will your ex forget you. So let's get straight into this, and the first moment that your ex will think of you less is point number 1, after a year. So when we think of the moments that your ex will think of you less, we can't ignore that big, huge moment on the calendar of when more than a year has passed since your breakup. So that's what we're talking about, from when the breakup took place to a year beyond that point. After a year, when a year has gone by, unfortunately, from my own research, your ex is going to be thinking of you less often. Now, this doesn't mean they're not ever going to be thinking of you, but they will be thinking of you less frequently than they did during the initial year post-breakup. So let me explain to you what my theory is based around from my research and why I believe this is the case. So when we consider the first year post-breakup, there are, of course, many anniversaries which are going to go by. You know, you're going to be having your birthday, you're going to be having your ex's birthday, you're going to be having New Year's Eve, you're going to be having Christmas Day if this is something big on your calendar. All of the other huge cultural and countrywide events and moments on that calendar are going to have come and gone during this first year. The anniversary of every major event, including your relationship starting and of course including your breakup taking place, which will be that year mark, this is when your ex is going to be particularly triggered into thinking about you. If we're to consider these huge moments on a calendar, these are all triggers. Big triggers, but whenever somebody notices the date on the calendar, and if they are these huge dates, they are likely to know without even having to double check what day of the year it is. They're just going to know that a certain day is coming up. And when they realise that it is that day, they're going to be naturally thinking of you. And if they're not thinking of you directly per se, it might be an event or moment which makes them think back to last year and previous years, where no doubt you featured hugely. So the difference between these, for example, is, of course, when it is your birthday, that is linked to you, so they're going to be thinking of you. When it is New Year's Eve, that isn't necessarily connected to you, but New Year's Eve is an important day on the calendar where we think back to prior New Year's Eves. And if you were a part of your ex's life during past New Year's Eves, then of course they are then going to be thinking of you in that way. So during this first year, there are many moments, many triggers, many memories to make your ex think of you. When we go post 1 year, when it is more than a year since your breakup took place, these moments still occur. These anniversaries still happen, but they hold a little less weight. Now, I'm not saying they hold a lot less weight, especially in the 2, 3, 4, 5 years afterwards. They're still fairly relevant in somebody's mindset. But if you go 10, 20, 30 years down the line, then of course, you're not going to be somebody who is thinking of those moments as particularly strong as you would have done during those early years. So basically, each year that goes by, those memories connected to those triggers, connected to those dates, are going to hold a little less weight. And that's why we can say, unfortunately, when we consider moments that your ex will think of you less, as soon as we go past a year, this is the case. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean they're never going to think of you, and it also doesn't mean that you can't get your ex back post 1 year. I know of many instances where dumpees have got back together with their dumpers more than a year later. It certainly happens, but unfortunately from my research, your chances of success do start to decline more than a year post-breakup. So can you get your ex back after a year since the breakup? Yes, you can. Is it going to be as easy as before? Probably not. Is it as likely? Probably not. But it is possible. And I'm not just talking about just over a year either. I'm talking about 2, 3, 4 years down the line. I've heard of instances where this has happened. So it's certainly possible, but I would not wait around. I'm not telling you to think, okay, it's quite likely I might get my ex back still. Let me wait around, sit in my room and not do anything every single day because I'm just going to wait for them. Unfortunately, that is now less likely to happen than when it was within that first year. So you've got to be living your life to the full. You've got to be doing your own thing. You've got to be making new connections. And if and when your ex does contact you, if you do get that chance to rebuild, if you want to reconnect, then this is when you take it on from that stage. Don't wait for your ex, but if it gets to that point where it's possible, then of course you can proceed if it's something that works for you. But by and large, we have to understand that after a year, your ex will think of you less. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast, about when your ex will forget you. And point number 2, and this is the second moment that your ex will think of you less, is if they have a child. Now, when I say if they have a child, I mean a child beyond your breakup. So if they already had children when you met, of course they're going to be taking a lot of their time, but you would have built memories around that family dynamic even if you were not the mother or the father of that child. Even if they were not your child, if you met your ex when they already had children, then you would have been building memories with your ex during the time they had children. So you would be a part of those memories and that process. If your ex has children post-breakup, if your ex has a child after you split up, then this is a moment when they're going to be thinking less of you. Now, if you have a child, it engulfs every second of your day, especially in those early few months and years. It's very, very challenging, very, very time consuming, all for the right reasons, of course, but it is very difficult to think of much else. So you can understand from that viewpoint, if your ex was to have a child after your breakup took place, we're going to be fully focusing on that child. Additional to the point is the fact that they are likely going to be building memories with the other parent of this new child. So unless they've already split up, unless it was something which was not planned and it was a casual relationship and maybe they don't even know that other person very well, unless it's that scenario where it's just your ex and the child living together or your ex visiting the child every so often, we've got to consider that there is likely going to be a third party. The other parent is going to be within this situation now, okay? Because if it is something where it was casual and not committed and maybe they're not actually together anymore, then yes, they're just focusing on that child. But if they are together with this new partner, you've got to understand that having a child with somebody is really going to focus my mind not on just the child, but this other person as well. So if you was with your ex for a number of years, for instance, and you split up and then within a few months you find out that your ex is going to become a parent to a child, and then 9 months after that they do become a parent, you've got to realise that they're going to be fully focusing on this situation. During the pregnancy itself, it's probably going to be quite intense as well if the two people are still together. So if you are a dumpee and you've heard that your ex is involved in a pregnancy right now, you've got to recognise that even before the child's born, but certainly after, unfortunately, they're going to be thinking of you less. It's not something necessarily against you, it's just the fact of life. They're going to be focusing on the child, and they are likely also going to be focusing on the other parent if they're still in a connection with them. So if you want to try to get your ex back and you find out that your ex is having a child with somebody else, then you really need to be focusing on your own journey, because your chances of reconnecting, unfortunately, are much slimmer from this point. Now, if you would like support and guidance on how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Maybe you have a direct question about your unique scenario and wondering whether or not your ex is likely thinking of you right now. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 3 and my final point of today's podcast about when your ex will forget you. And point number 3 is, so when does an ex forget you? So in point number 3, I want to answer the main question, and you want to know what is likely to be the situation in your future, whether your ex could and when they will forget you. In my opinion, they will never ever truly forget you. Even if they have a child with somebody else, even if it's more than a year since your breakup, whatever the situation arises, they're never going to fully forget you. Like I said in point number 1, even after a year, they are still going to have moments of thinking of you. Yes, those dates on the calendar aren't going to sting as much, where they think of you in a more powerful way like within a year, but they're still going to think of you. Even if they have a child with somebody else, there's still going to be moments where they have a chance to reflect on the past. It's not completely impossible to get your ex back from any real position. Is it less likely? Yes, it is, but it's not impossible. I'm not telling you to wait around, but I do not believe an ex will ever forget you. You will always be part of their life story. They will always be part of your life story. This is something which can't be changed. It can't be altered. It doesn't matter how you or your ex feel about one another right now. They and you are never going to forget one another. And as you move forward through life, the fading effect bias is going to play in the favour of you and your ex thinking back more favourably than perhaps it actually even was between you. The fading effect bias dictates that negative memories fade sooner over time in comparison to positive memories. So if you have a situation where you and your ex had a lot of arguing or whatever, it doesn't mean that your ex is going to forget those arguments happened, but the weight and the power and the relevance of those arguments are going to weigh less than the positive, wonderful memories you shared with one another. You have to understand that positive memories last longer in the intensity in the mind than the negative. The negative don't vanish, but they just don't weigh on our mind as much as the positive. It's what's also known as wearing rose-tinted glasses. And I'm not saying that your ex should be wanting to get back with you by only wearing rose-tinted glasses. And I'm not saying that you should only be wanting to get back with your ex due to wearing rose-tinted glasses. If you're a dumpee, you've also got to understand that the pull you feel towards your ex is somewhat down to the fact that there is nothing more attractive than rejection. You are feeling the way you do towards your ex somewhat because rejection breeds obsession. You have to realise that there are moments in the past that if you reflect on, you might realise we're not that great. Now, whether or not that's enough for you to want or not want your ex back is something for you to decide and for your ex to. But what I can say is that as the future moves forward, we think of the positive much clearer than the negative. So even though I'm saying that after a year, if your ex was to have a child with somebody else, your chances reduce, it never fully extinguishes that possibility. It doesn't mean you should wait around, but it also doesn't mean you should be completely shocked if you one day hear from them. Your ex will never forget you. I'm sure you can think back to your early childhood and remember people within your life back then who haven't been within your life for decades since. Maybe you're somebody who can think back to your childhood at your school days and you remember people you went to school with that you haven't seen with since primary school, since elementary school. Maybe you can remember their names. Okay, you was not in a romantic relationship with those people, and you can remember them decades later. So how on earth could you ever forget your ex, who you was in a romantic relationship as an adult? You can't, you won't, and neither will your ex. Your ex, the dumper, will never forget you. It doesn't mean they'll want to reconnect one day, but it does mean there's a chance. It means that one day they could reflect, start to miss you, and decide to reach out. Whether or not you decide this is right for you is something for you to consider then. But you can't wait for them. You can't clock watch, and you must do your thing. So please, don't wait around for your ex, and please keep moving forward. Now, if you want to know the traits that you need to try and get your ex back, please click the middle of the screen right now. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.